Thank you, Gerard. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome. It's a pleasure to see you all here. As Gerard has highlighted, we've had the pleasure of coming to Mauritius every year for the last 3.5 years. In fact, we listed in Mauritius in April 2014. So we've been a listed company more than 3 years. We actually have been coming to Mauritius for approximately 5 years because there was a significant period of investment by us as a team and the company in the education of the Mauritian market and potential shareholders and institutions as to why would a company like ours come to Mauritius, why would we list here, why would it be good for the financial markets, and for the Mauritian retail market, investment market to have exposure to coal investments at the time. And it was a quite interesting period because some of you may remember there was a lot in the press going on in Mauritius at the time around coal and how dirty it was, how horrible it is, and the local power generation in the country. And I ended up in the newspapers here and being on TV for interviews as to why coal is not a bad investment and so on and so forth. So it's been an interesting journey. However, as Gerard said, we certainly more than kept the faith and have morphed the company into something far bigger now and far more reaching in terms of its impact in the Southern African development community, of which we see Mauritius as a part, in our contribution towards, as we have said, our new byword, powering the future. The team has remained constant throughout this, and I want to emphasize some of the key aspects that makes this company a good investment. And one of the first things with investments is people, and investors invest in people, and they want to see experienced people, they want to see consistent people. And we built this business on a very simple premise, that is, we say what we do and we do what we say. And we're fully transparent about it every step of the way. There's no hidden agendas. Everything is open for everyone to see. And while that can be very frightening to some people, they don't like to put it all out there, we've always believed that it's the right way to do it. And we've received enormous support from our shareholders, from the investment community in general as a result of that. And we will continue to do that. And that's why fundamentally we're back here again to come and give people in Mauritius an update as to where we are, what we're doing, and what we intend to do going forward. I will talk a little bit more about our positioning in Mauritius later, but without any further ado, let's focus on the company and the opportunity that is Shumba Energy and Investment. And I'll hand over to Mashali, who's very ably managing the operational side of the business as managing director, as an executive, and of course with the able support of Tapali on the financial side. So Mashali, please, we'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to our conference. I'm going to stand up a bit. Just to get my legs moving, but also to make it a bit more animated. The key thing here is that we've continued to grow in the last 3 years. When we first listed here, we just had one asset. We've now got 3 coal assets, one underground coal gasification project, and we're also working on solar. So we've continued to develop. We recently had 2 of our assets valued by KPMG at approximately 120 million US dollars. If you look at the gap between that valuation on just 2 of our assets to what our listed valuation is, roughly about 30 million US dollars, you'll see that there's a big arbitrage in terms of value. So this is just an overview of our coal projects and the UCG projects. When we first listed here, we only had 1.1 billion tons of coal. We are now sitting at roughly 4.5 billion tons. Just to put that in contrast, it's enough coal to support the whole of Southern Africa for about 25 to 30 years for power generation. A country the size of Mauritius, I see now you're close to using about 500 megawatts per annum. So 500 megawatts over 30 years will consume in the region of say about 70 million tons over 30 years. So I won't say how many years this coal could power a country the size of Mauritius for, but I'm just trying to give you a picture. It's a lot of coal that is sitting there. So our strategy really has been to say Botswana is the best credit rating in Africa. It's a great destination, centrally located. We're now the biggest coal resource holder in Botswana, and we intend to leverage that position to create value for our shareholders. In a nutshell, I did mention the market cap. Just a conversion from Botswana Pula to US dollars, you divide it by 10. So to date, in our three projects, roughly 200 million Pula has been invested, so that's about 20 million US dollars. And our main shareholders have come out of Botswana. The pension funds, about 35% locally, and who are majority locally owned out of Botswana. So we did mention, Gerard did mention the Mauritius participation here. We'd hope that over the last few years, Mauritian investors will be more active and will see a different dichotomy, a different mixed shareholder spread. However, that hasn't come. I think apart from just the unfamiliarity with mining, there's been a lot of things happening in Mauritius, politics, scandals, etc. So I think that maybe has detracted from just investing in companies such as us. That is our board. I won't dwell on it too much yet. Made a fairly good introduction. So on the power side, what we're saying is that this is where Botswana is. So it's right there. We're centrally located in southern Africa, and the blue lines, they show you the high voltage transmission network. So those are the electricity highways that we're going to use to get our power to all our neighboring countries. What is key about Botswana is we've got the highest credit rating on the continent. We are very transparent, very stable, and there are chronic power shortages in the region. So what we use as our benchmark in terms of pricing is the regional tariff based on Eskom. And Eskom is the South African power utility. So for years, South Africa has been supplying power to most of the region, being by far the largest, is the single largest generator of power on the continent. I think in sub-Saharan Africa, although Nigeria is roughly the same size in terms of GDP, it only consumes or generates about 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts, whereas South Africa, when things are working, generates about 35,000 megawatts. So you can see there's a whole magnitude between the two. And in the last 7 years, or say in the last 7 years, you're looking at tariff increases of over 300%. So from us as somebody who will be selling coal and producing electricity, our benchmark pricing is on the rise. And the things contributing to this is one, you've got a population that is moving from lower class to middle class, such as you see in China, India, and of course, once people get to middle class and up, everybody must have a TV, kettles, and all the usual stuff that creature comforts that everybody has. But apart from that, there's also a number of programs for rural electrification. So what you find in Africa, on the continent, because the countries are so big, you find that although I showed you the transmission backgrounds, those are focused where the population is most dense. But in a lot of the rural areas where there's still a lot of people, over 50%, they're working on getting power there. So a country like South Africa will have the greatest penetration in terms of market consumption of power. That's close to 50-60%. But other countries, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Zambia, the population in the country that's got access to power is lower. And so as we're moving from them not having power to having power, again, the demand goes up. Specifically for our interests, there's a cross-border procurement program underway now between Botswana and South Africa for 3,750 megawatts from Botswana. And out of Botswana, I mentioned, we're the largest resource holder in the country. And of 3 advanced projects that can take advantage of this opportunity, we've got 2 of them. So we're pretty much in a very strong position to take part in this. And to put that number into context, to build a 300 megawatt power station will cost you about $600 to $700 million. So to do 3,750 megawatts, you can imagine the capital investment and associated returns that come with that. The main project that we're developing at the moment for power generation for cross-border is called the Mabasekwa Export IPP. We actually bought this project 2015. We closed the transaction. And in the time that we've had the asset, we've managed to get all the licensing and permitting that will allow us to take part in this process. What is great about this project is that the coal is very low cost to mine. So the coal seam itself is about 18 meters thick, 18 meters. So it's just from the floor here to the roof here, you're looking at about, say, 4 meters, 4 to 5 meters. So it's about 4 times the height of this room. That's the thickness of the seam, just to put it in context. And we have about 1.1 million tons. So we'll be getting water from a nearby dam, Shasha Dam. And we already have got 50-year surface rights for the mine and the power station. And of course, we've got the mineral rights for the coal. I won't bog you down too much on the technical aspects of it, but needless to say, this is what the 3 mining blocks there, very thick coal, low strip ratios, and very good location in terms of infrastructure. So you can literally get to site in a small vehicle, which is very convenient, because in other parts of Africa, some places you have to fly in with a helicopter because there are no roads to get to site. This is just the production scenario over the life of the mine. Again, the key thing here is just to illustrate that the coal is there, it's good quality for power generation, and we've modeled it over the life of the power station. We are partnered with a group called GS Engineering Construction. So it's a $1 billion group out of South Korea, and they are builders and operators of power stations. They're already doing, they're close to 7,000 megawatts as we speak now in South Korea. And the key thing about GS is that they've already been awarded another project in Botswana, so they're already in country, and that was one of the things that made them attractive to us. I won't dwell too much on, this is just more of the technical information, but needless to say, apart from the coal, we've got the other key parameters, which is to have water, to have lifestyle, and plus we have got all our environmental approvals. So everything we need to get the projects going, we have it, and that's why we're already in advanced discussions with the government. Sechaba Coal IPP, that was the original asset that we listed here, or that we had when we listed here in Mauritius. Funny enough, the first project I showed you, we actually bought it, so we managed to get a project that was slightly ahead in terms of licensing and permitting. Here, we're still finalizing the permitting. The only thing really that's left is for government to come back to us. But in terms of the work on the project itself, we've concluded it. With this project, it is very nearby to operating government power stations, so we're also in the process of bidding to supply them with coal. And again, a lot of the work has been conducted. One approach that we've done this year, which has been an addition to what we've been doing before, about April, March last year, we registered a subsidiary here in Mauritius called Shumba Coal Trading. And when we started, the thermal coal prices globally were fairly low, but in recent months and years, they've come back up to a very high sustainable level. So what we have started doing, we registered the coal trading company, and this is the first asset that we've picked up, specifically looking at selling coal into the region and outside of the continent. So whereas this was not a market for us before, this is a market for us now. So we just closed this transaction. We decided to proceed with it in February, and in total we'll be paying about $3 million initially, but there will be further payments required once the asset gets into production. But before I talk about the asset itself, what we have done on top of that, we've partnered with a group called HMS Bergbau. So HMS is a German-listed coal-traded company, very active in Southern Africa. And the beautiful thing about HMS is that they are, on top of being part owners in operating mines in South Africa, they are also traders of coal in Southern Africa, but globally. And they've got a very large list of clients. And the good thing for us, the relationship we have, is that we will be responsible for sourcing all of the coal in Botswana, and we'll work with them on the marketing aspect of it. We signed this agreement in January this year, and already we've started to move some small quantities of coal, trial shipments for local smelters, etc. So this is already working very well for us. And the idea with HMS is we're going to start off just trading coal, but as we get this asset we just bought into production, then we will use that coal in addition to the coal that we're trading already. From the regional market, one thing to understand is that this is where our project is, the red dot. What is key here is that we've got a market of about 20 million tons in very close proximity coming to our project. So I circle here because the South African coal fields are in this area. Now, the distance to get coal from here to here is closer than from here to there. Therefore, we do have a competitive advantage in terms of logistics. But secondly, the South Africans are very close to the ports here, where they're getting record very high prices for coal now. So they are much happier to export their coal and focus on that. So that opens up the market for us to really tap into these players that are very close to Botswana. So that is, in a nutshell, our strategy. The coal project we've secured is 5 kilometers from an operating railway line, which means that most of these, so these are cement manufacturers, smelters, etc. They all have their own railway siding, so it's very easy for us to either rail the coal there or we can truck it. The seaborne market is revived again. We've seen a lot of activity, not just in China, but also with our new leader in the US. He's decided that he's going to bring coal back. So, there's an old saying, adage, strike while the iron is hot. So one of the things we are doing is looking at the export market together with our partners as well. In terms of ports, we've got access to a number of ports in South Africa and in Mozambique. But I think what is key is this diagram here. If you look at the moment, the FOB costs price is about 78 to $85 per ton. Our mining cost is actually very low. It's about $20 per ton. So the in-between transport cost is really what affects us, and that's why the closer markets are more attractive. But with the prices where they are now, even exports are possible. And there's a slide missing here. Let me see if I can put it up here. Yeah. So from a study that was done on this asset, one of the key things is it was compared to other coal mines in Southern Africa. And you can see here we're way in the lower quartile in terms of costing. So not only is the asset huge and low cost to mine, but it's also compared to other peers in the region, a much lower asset. What does that mean? It means for us, it means longevity, because you know how the market works. When times get rough, prices go down. The lower you are down the cost curve, the more legs you have. Coming to the asset itself, I won't dwell on it too much, but needless to say, this asset by itself has got 2.45 billion tons of coal. So this one asset is half our resource base, or more than half. It's also open cast, but what's key about it, it's close to infrastructure, as I may explain. So you can see right here, the railway siding is there, and along this railway line, there's also a highway. So I think in terms of projects, I don't want to get too much bogged down on the technical aspects on it, but what you need to remember about Shumba going forward, I haven't spoken about our solar. I'll touch on that now, but on the coal side, we're focusing on low-cost generation. We can export coal or produce power domestically for regional consumption and domestic consumption. One of the key things, we've got full government support, including from government pension funds, who are our large shareholders. All our projects have environmental studies that are complete, except the one that we just picked up now. And we've got access to all the other things you need, infrastructure, water, and that kind of thing. So from a Shumba energy perspective, or when we started as Shumba Coal, we have created significant value. And one of the challenges we've had, I think since we listed here in Mauritius, I think we've only traded a couple of times. So one of the problems we have is that we're listed in Botswana, where there's a lot more activity, and we're listed here where there isn't much activity. So the price in Botswana is actually getting held down by the price here, because it's not moving. Before we listed, there's the theory of a perfect market, whereby when you're listed, then a market will always find the optimum price through its liquidity and trading. But in reality, it doesn't work, particularly when you don't have liquidity. And because we haven't had many trades here, I think our share price is roughly where it was where it listed, and we have had some concern from investors. Why is it not moving there in Mauritius? So on the solar side, which Jihad mentioned, we are working quietly in the background. Botswana does have one of the most significant solar resources in the region. Now, in terms of the two energy sources, that contrary to popular belief, they're actually synergistic in opposed to being against each other. So solar, you utilize when the sun is out, obviously, and it's now with the pricing of solar panels, the cost of just raw solar is actually cheaper than coal, slightly cheaper. However, it's not baseload electricity. So once you start to say you want to store solar, then it becomes too expensive. So what you want to do is for you to work with solar during the day, whereby your base load energy is the coal, and then the solar complements the coal. And it's great during the day because that's where most businesses are open, most industries are operational. And then the coal is the base load that is on all the time, whether it's night or day. So we see that as synergistics, and as an energy company, from the development aspect of it, developing a solar project is a lot cheaper, a lot easier. I would say as far as 10 times cheaper than a coal-based project. I'll tell you why. With solar, the resource is free. So it's not something you need to develop. Somebody sitting in America or in Botswana, we can just sit on a computer and just print out what your solar resource in Mauritius is in now, and it will be 99% accurate. Whereas with a coal resource, you have to drill a lot of expensive holes, you have to do a lot of expensive testing to know what you have in the ground, and that's the more expensive part of the development cost. Plus the other aspects of it, the environmental work is a lot more extensive. You need to be worried about things like effects on hydrogeology, flora and fauna, and all this stuff. Whereas with solar, it's really a surface installation. And I'll give you one free fact. One 6x6 plot of land, so 6 kilometers by 6 kilometers, can power the whole of Botswana. In the context of Botswana, that's a very small piece of land. I mean, so what I'm saying is that there's a lot of future in solar. However, in the foreseeable future, it's not going to replace coal, but they can work together. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's our update in a nutshell.
You can teach me a lot. You can teach me how to take a step. You can show me how to tie my shoes. You can teach me how to read and write, how to win and how to lose. You can teach me how to cross my T's. You can show me how to dot my I's. But did you know I could learn to save a life?
please feel free.
The question is, you just said that investments in solar energy is much cheaper. I understand that it can be complementary. Why couldn't you just shift your investment strategy from coal to solar?
Because there'll be no power at night.
Can I answer that, Bashar?
Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Let me answer that. Maybe you want to bring the microphone so you can catch it.
Not with your voice.
I'm very pleased for your question because this gives me an opportunity to dispel what is a very incorrect perception in the world about solar power. Okay. While solar power is one of the energy alternatives we have in the world, unfortunately, it does have a high cost of development, a very high capital cost, and it also has a very, very long-term return on investment. I mean, the typical return on a solar project, some of the largest ones in the world that have been recently built, they look at returns on just the capital invested taking upwards of 25 years. It's a very, very, very long-term investment that only very large projects, large-scale projects have any chance of success, and typically they need country-sized development banks to be involved to finance those types of things. Now, the other side of solar is, of course, the domestic solar panels you'll see on a house, and again, they are supplementary. The single biggest problem we have with solar power, as with all renewable energy sources, such as wind, is we have no ability to store the energy when it is produced at that moment in time right now. There is no sustainable, for want of better terminology, battery system, storage system that's able to store up the energy as it's produced and then release it at the appropriate time when the demand requires it. That is one of the single largest drives in technology in the world today is energy storage and battery technology. And until that catches up with the renewable sources of power, the renewable generators like wind, which is a very intermittent source, and like hydro, which can be on a very large scale, but there are very few places in the world where a hydro generation plant can be built sustainably. And they're also, in fact, strongly impacted by environmental change, weather change. If you have low rainfall and the rivers don't flow, the dams are not full and the power generators don't work. We have many examples of that in Africa. The Cahora Bassa project, which was the largest in Africa and one of the largest in the world for many years, hasn't produced its nameplate capacity of power for the last 20 years because simply there hasn't been the rainfall to provide the water to drive the hydro generators. And sun, although people think Africa's sunny all the time, it's not sunny all the time. We also have long seasons of cloud and rain where the thermal energy is not at peak. So there are very few spots, and that's to our advantage as Shumba, like northern Botswana, where you have that strong thermal energy for 330 days a year where you could build a sustainable plant. But as Mashali rightly says, you have no grid connections there. You have no way to get it to the users, and therefore it's just not an economic proposition right now. If you then take a step away from that and then say, well, okay, but coal is horrible and coal is dirty and everybody tells us, the carbon problem and the pollution, again, it's the biggest red herring out there in the world. It is not true. Carbon dioxide is the single thing that we need to sustain and maintain life in the world. What people don't tell you when they talk about carbon and how bad it is, what they're really talking about is carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, the things that are emitted by certain thermal processes. But technology we have today, sometimes they call it clean coal technology, but the technology we have to burn coal of a high quality generates emissions to the atmosphere at levels which are far lower than the average manufacturing factory. So there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation and disinformation in the world today about energy. Okay. The simple fact is, if you look at I can point you to many reports out there in the world by many experts, is that baseload power, i.e. the power that we all rely on, that when we switch the switch on the wall, it comes on every time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that industry needs, that the human race needs to support life, will mainly be supplied by thermal energy from burning coal for the next at least 50 to 80 years. The other technologies that are out there are competing. Definitely they have a role. Definitely they're going to come in time. Okay. But if you look in the window of investment, the time frame for this company that we focus on, Shumba Energy, and what we're doing, and especially in the context of Southern Africa, coal is the only sustainable source of baseload power in an economic environment that has a massive deficit in power available for economic development right now. Currently sitting around 30 gigawatts deficit. That's 30,000 megawatts of power shortage right now. And the established power stations in the biggest power generator on the continent, South Africa, most of them are between 50 and 70 years old and are teetering on the brink of collapse. They're held together with chewing gum and string right now, and it's very difficult to maintain them. So that's why Eskom are putting a lot of money into building, there's 2 big new power stations going to come on stream in the next 5-6 years of around 5,000 megawatts. But that's by no way going to plug the deficit. Even the renewable programs that are out there, adding some wind power, some solar power, is not even going to scratch the deficit. And hence the intelligence of the governments of Botswana and South Africa that said, well, we have to look at elsewhere, and hence the cross-border supply program, which we are engaged in wanting to supply into as Shumba Energy. We have world-class projects, world-class jurisdiction, best credit rating, not only in the continent of Africa, but if you look at the corruption indices around the world, that Botswana, has a higher rating than the UK, than Germany, than France, than the USA, So it's a very transparent, very safe investment environment for the investment community at any level, whether you're institutional or retail. And again, as an investor, whether you're a public investor or an institutional investor, what are the key things you want to look at? You want to look at a safe jurisdiction, a strong management. You want a resource that's sustainable and scalable, i.e. large like we have. You want access to the market. You want to know there is a market. And you want a price trajectory that can make the company profitable going forward in the long term, to generate profits and therefore returns to investors and shareholders. Shumba Energy delivers all those things.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes?
Yes.
A couple of questions for the managing director. One is you have 4.5 billion tons, metric tons of coal, and for over how long do you expect to be mining this coal? And 2, since Botswana is land up, and to sell coal, you need to have a proper railway connection. It's just 6 kilometers away from the nearest railway line. So are you planning to invest in a railway line? And third question, I've seen you index to a price on what is the Eskom price, but we all know how Eskom is being run, and you mentioned the UP and CJ power plants, they've been a very high cost of building the plant. And why do you think your price to Eskom? Why would you that they are increasing the prices to help the company to survive with it?
You ask.
Question for price.
Yeah, you ask.
Oh, the press.
Okay.
Okay.
Just to quickly clarify, the price for electricity in South Africa is set up by the independent regulator, which
Yeah,
is...
but it's Eskom which
No.
No, it's not.
It's
No.
Eskom makes the request. I want the price.
Yes, Eskom makes but the regulator looks at all the inputs to be able to come to a particular price. So it's not a price that Eskom pushes into the market. All the time that Eskom has went there with price request, of double digits, they've come back with single digit prices. So there is a bit of independence in terms of what the price of electricity is in the market, because it's determined, but it's separately from what Eskom is charging.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, it's like asking, why do you use the US dollar? Because it's Eskom supplies all the power in the region, most of it. So you can only benchmark against them because they are the ones who are going to be. If someone's going to have an alternative, it has to be an alternative to Eskom. In terms of pricing as well, just to give you a bit of history, in the former regime, before 1995, the capital expenditures were actually paid by government, and Eskom only needed to be concerned with managing its operating costs. So therefore, if you go back 10, 15 years, South Africa had the cheapest power, some of the cheapest power on the planet. So even now, as it stands, the prices that Eskom is charging, because don't forget, they've got a whole fleet of older power stations. Medupi and Kusilia are one of about 10 power stations. So yes, they're overrun and all of that, but those old power stations whom the capex is not included in the tariff are more than subsidizing any overpricing that Medupi and Kusilia would put. So even if you do the calculations, what Eskom is charging today, by any standard, so we use, in fact, for financial modeling, we work with KPMG, we work with a group called Cresco, we work with Fieldstone. If you just work on the basis of pure getting your capex and covering your OPEX back, you're still coming in roughly in line, or even in some cases slightly more than what Eskom is charging. So I think as a benchmark, a transparent one, it's fairly fine. And to answer the other two questions, the reserves, honestly, I don't think we'll mine them in our lifetime. So if we mine 20%, we'll have done well, because they're just too much. In terms of rail, 5 kilometers is not a lot in terms of you can track it, you can put a conveyor belt. 5 kilometers in terms of getting to a railway siding is normally between the boundaries, or can be within the boundaries of a mining operation. So it's not something that's going to add any significant additional cost.
My another question is regarding the rate.
Yes.
Since you say it's easy to connect from your country to your railway line,
Yeah.
should we then imply or conclude that sooner or later you'll be sending your coal down the richest way, or?
I think the key thing there is going to be the cost of transport. So yes, we're close to rail, but the distance is far. So at these prices, it's fine. But then at the moment, that specific, we may move other coal to Richards Bay or to Durban. But by the time our project that we just bought comes on the market, we're looking 12 to 15 months. We don't know what the prices will be doing. So I can only answer that question then.
Well, let me try and make it a little bit clearer for you. The overall strategy we have as a company is that we want to be a multi-product stream business so that we can hedge across the market. So what do I mean by that? Well, we have a domestic market in Botswana, which is both truly domestic retail and also industrial. We then have a regional export, i.e. outside Botswana, domestic and industrial market, okay, that we can supply very, very easily, either by truck or by existing rail links that we have there. And then after that, we have the true export market, i.e. ex-Africa, which will go from the Indian Ocean ports, existing and planned, or in the future potentially from the Atlantic ports. And how would we do that? Well, right now there's 3 main logistical corridors. There's one existing logistical corridor predominated by Transnet in South Africa, but also with a very short link into Botswana Rail, no problem. So we can actually ship already and have been offered an allocation by Transnet in cooperation with Botswana Rail of 10 million tonnes per annum to the Indian Ocean ports that exist already. So that pipeline already exists. If we started tomorrow at Sashaba, our project, and produced Taukomi Bright Seam coal, which is a very high quality export coal, we've immediately got access to the market for that should we choose to do so. Okay. Then there are 2 other logistical corridors on the drawing board that have been for some time. One's a little more advanced than the other one. One is the Eastern Corridor that literally goes from Botswana, then goes through South Africa, all the way through into Mozambique, and a brand new deep water port and connection, roughly 1,100 kilometers rail link that's on the board, and that will come, but it's not going to be in the next probably 3, 4, 5 years. And then there's a western corridor through to Namibia, another one, which is around 900 to 1,000 kilometers also. And that's also under development. So, you know, in terms of the landlocked nature of our country, does it really stop us from selling what we can produce? No, it doesn't. As I said, that's why we've built the business in a way where we hedge it across all the possible markets in the region. And one of the other aspects, of course, is, you know, not only selling the coal. Remember, we've morphed the company now into being an energy company primarily. So our key goal is to have the mine mouth independent power plants on our properties. So Mabasekwa is planned to have at least 600 megawatts of generative capacity, phase 1 on the project. Sashaba, 300 megawatts. And that power, like Sashaba, is probably going to be supplied cross-border into Namibia, who have a demand. We've already had talks with Namibian Power Company about that. So this is how we hedging our strategy. You know, mine coal straight into the power plant, generate energy, and get the full value of the product through selling electricity. But at the same time, you're able to supply all the other markets. So we're not locked into one position. And in some cases, energy prices are up, coal prices are down. In different markets, coal price elevates. So across that, you're able to hedge across the market and balance out your pricing and therefore sustainable profitability going forward. So we've looked at all these aspects. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
You said that Shumba coal didn't work in Mauritius. Why this Shumba Energy Limited would work?
Okay.
May I take this, Alan, just on the comment on not working in Mauritius?
Yeah, sure.
I think we have to be careful what we say and how we
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah.
In Mauritius, we've been very successful at diversifying historically our economy from sugar to what it is today. It's been massively successful. We projected in the 1970s the price of sugar 40 years ahead, which was wrong. And had we not diversified into tourism and then the financial sectors, we would not be the country we are today. So Mauritius will try things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. And when the regulators in Mauritius SEM decided to attract mining companies, they set up the legislation to facilitate mining companies listing in Mauritius at a cheaper cost than they would list in markets such as in London. To give you an example, a listing of a company in London costs about £600,000, and to maintain it will cost between £150,000 to £200,000. That's a lot of money for a company that is not generating any revenue. A listing in Mauritius costs a fraction of that price. So, rightly so, the regulators said, why don't we facilitate and try and bring in small mining companies? After all, we're next to Africa. So it fit into an African strategy of saying we're doing quite well in the offshore sector in Africa without doing any marketing for any of my colleagues. We know some of the very prominent offshore management companies that are quite successful in Africa. It's one step removed from simply going into the mining sector, because after all, Mauritius attracts money. The money comes and sits on bank accounts here. These are investors. The money are here for a long time sometimes, and they're looking for routes of investments. So all this made a lot of sense. So the regulators were quite correct in taking that first step. Where things didn't quite work out on a macroeconomic level is that the timing of taking Mauritius into the junior mining space from the pricing of commodities perspective was probably not the best time. We just hit a financial crisis in 2008 and 9, and the prices of commodities had hit rock bottom. When it did hit rock bottom in 2009, 10, 11, a lot of people lost a lot of money in the rest of the world. So investors were themselves very adverse to putting more money into these operations. So that's the first reason, timing and prices of commodities. Had Mauritius taken that route in 2006 or 7, I would say it would have been probably extremely successful. The second reason is because, if you like, somewhere down the line, when the regulator makes a move, private sector, those who support the regulators, also have to make the move. The example would be from tourism, where when we had the legislation in tourism in 1981, 82, and so on, we then had to ensure we had the right airplanes, the capacity to bring people in, that we had the hotels, and so on. In the case of the financial industry and mining, when we started to attract junior mining companies, we would need to have at the same time the bankers in place, the analysts and the people in place to understand what a mining company is about, so that they can then in turn explain that to potential investors locally and also internationally. So the regulators did their job, but then at the bottom of the scale, we needed to have a mobilization from the local markets to actually have the right people in place, and then we could have attracted mining companies from Australia, from Toronto, from Canada, and so on. And the last bit I wanted to add of why it hasn't been to what it be our expectation of success, and we would have liked to have seen it happen, is I believe that, you know, in global investment terms, we also needed to have big investment houses here, probably already, ready and waiting. It's a bit like, again, if you were doing in the offshore, you want to have big law firms here, because how do you get the contracts in place? So there was a bit of a mismatch. That it will not happen in the future, I think, is difficult to say. I know my country, and I think we're going to regroup, and as commodity prices goes the other way, which is happening now, it's a question of time. I'll stop there about our decision. I'll pass that over to Alan, but that was just an overview.
No, look, I think in closing, I think Grant's given a very clear picture. And that has been our key disappointment, in that we personally supported the regulator and SEM, who came to us and said, well, we need to have at least one mining company here. And we said, okay, we'll put our hand up, we'll be that mining company, we'll come here, we'll bring our business here, we will list here, we will engage with the market to try and educate the market, and we went out there and we met the brokers and some of the investment houses, and we even were instrumental in bringing the Mines and Money, International Mines and Money Group here for a mining conference in Mauritius, which was held at the Westin. And SEM was there, and there was the big presentation about why we want mining companies to come to Mauritius. But as Grant alluded to, the journeyman, the engineering of within the financial institutions, the analysts, the brokers that were experienced and focused on mining just were not brought in by to drive that market and support that market. And so we have seen no traction. And despite us coming here on a regular basis and telling the market what we're doing, unfortunately it hasn't worked. So it's been disappointing. What will happen from here forward? Well, we have to review our position and see if that's not going to change. We are fortunately now in a different market space. We are in an upward trajectory. I mean, precious metals is probably already in its second inning of the new bull market. We're 18 months into a big turnaround. The other bulk commodities also have had some strong upward price development, but subsequently there's been a correction, which was expected. And the base metal markets and the coal market is probably only in its first inning of a new bull market. But prices are on an upward trajectory. And I mean, fundamentally, in the investment space, if you look at what investors look at, whether it's gilts, government bonds, or the equities market or commodities, the safe bet today, has to be the commodities markets. It has to be equities. It has to be junior mining stocks. That's where you can get your big returns because they're tangible. And in the future, tangible commodities like coal, gold, iron ore, copper, zinc, lead, whatever it is, those are the things that will remain solid and tradable and real. Whereas the forex, the currencies, the market, I mean, the major countries of the world, let's face it, they're bankrupt. We're seeing a picture of smoke and mirrors. I mean, the US as a country is $200 trillion in debt. Yes, they talk about the $20 trillion or foreign debt, but the country's $200 trillion in debt. They can never repay it. The European Union is exactly the same. Japan is even worse, So in a scenario where, the top 8, 10, 15 countries of the world can never repay the debt, and it's got so big they can't even inflate it away anymore, doesn't matter what they do with interest rates. The only safe haven is going to be solid commodities. And that's why you're seeing this resurgence in the junior mining market worldwide, and you will continue to see it. There are many very experienced analysts out there that will tell you that, and I mean, there's one in particular that's talking about $15,000 an ounce gold. I think he's smoking his socks personally, but, it's very real that we could see a price scenario very soon with gold going more than $2,000, and it may reach $5,000 an ounce. We may see bulk commodities, many multiples higher than they are now, including coal as an energy resource. So in essence, I think the prognosis going forward is very good for investments in the commodities market, where the human race is a very hungry animal and energy is a fundamental for human life. And that's why we're positioned in this space, and we think that Shumba is a good bet. So in closing, thank you very much. I think
You can teach me a lot. You can teach me how to take a step. You can show me how to tie my shoes. You can teach me how to read and write, how to win and how to lose. You can teach me how to cross my T's. You can show me how to dot my I's. But did you know I could learn to save a life?